Hello, my name is Sarah Guttman, and this is 5S and SOPs. Five S began in Japan at Toyota Motor Company in the early to mid 20th century. And this was a way for them to eliminate waste out on the production floor. And 5S stands for 5 S's, the first being sort, second straighten, third shine, fourth standardize, and 5 sustain. And they began to do this, obviously, when they were making cars to increase production and also make more money. So why do they want to, does any company want a 5S? Well, first, it reduces non-value added costs. The second, it distinguishes between usual and unusual conditions. So if you come into your work area, you will notice right away if things are out of place, if something that you need to do the production is not there, maybe there's extra things in the work area where you're like, I don't need this. And it's also the building block to continuous improvement, and it involves production line employees to improve the processes and eliminate waste. So this involves everybody in the company, not just upper management, not just the people that are actually making the parts. So there's 8 different types of waste, and we can use the acronym downtime to describe these 8 wastes. The first is defects. So this would be like rework, or if you have held product for anything that might be wrong quality-wise. The next is O for overproduction. So this would include any time it takes to set up your work area. So if it takes you time to set it up, then that's time you're not producing. W stands for waiting or idle time. So perhaps you're waiting for raw materials to come to the line. N stands for non-utilized people. So there might be some very talented people that work for your company, and maybe they're just stacking boxes off the production line and they have some good ideas, but they're not being listened to. The T stands for transportation. Could be transportation of forklifts. So if your work area is down on the west side of the plant and where you store finished inventory is way down on the east side of the plant and they have to go about a country mile to get there, that's wasted time. I stands for inventory, and how much space does your inventory take up? So if you're holding a lot of inventory, then you're taking up a lot of space for maybe inventory that you might need to hold for a little bit and then send out. M stands for excessive motion in the work area. So if you're in your work area, everything should be within arm's reach. You shouldn't have to walk, 3 doors down to go get a screwdriver or pliers. And then the E stands for extra processing. So you should really make what the customer pays for. Sometimes companies like to produce for inventory, and really that's just more added waste. So when do we want a 5S? When your work area is unorderly, unorganized, very jumbled up like the picture on the screen, if you're unable to find the correct tools or information quickly, or if you're lacking standards of work. And what does each step mean? So the first step is sort, discerning between useful and non-useful items. So you sort through your work area and you keep what you use, you get rid of what you don't use. The second is set in order, so everything has a place and a place for everything. The third, shine, keeping work areas clean. The fourth, standardize. It is the how-to of the first 3 S's. And then sustain, maintain your whole system. So the first S, sort, always keep the items that you always use. So as you're going through this, let's say you were doing your work desk or perhaps your desk at home, you would want to keep things that you always use. So you always use a pen, you always use your stapler, you always use paper for your printer. You move items that you occasionally use to an area nearby so let's say you maybe use these once a month, you can have them a few steps away so that they're still near you, but they're not within arm's reach. And things that you never use can be red tag and moved to a separate area of your home. Of course, if you're at home, you probably won't red tag, but if you're at work, you'll red tag, and you can move it to a separate area and see what you haven't used for a year. If it's still sitting there for a year later unused, then it's definitely time to get rid of it. Set in order. So after you sort through everything, you need to set everything in order. All your tools, all your pens, all your staplers, your paper clips, whatever you are organizing, and everything should be within arm's reach, and having a labeled location for each tool or piece of equipment. And here, this is a picture of my work area at work, and these are some tools that I use to grade cheese. The picture on the left resembles what my office kind of looked like when I started this position about 1.5 years ago. And all of our tools were just randomly laying on the counter next to our cutting board, and there wasn't really any way of knowing whether or not everything was there unless you stopped and was like, okay, I have this piece of equipment, I have this piece of equipment. And we do have to do daily and shiftly tool checks for sharp objects where I work. So every shift has to do that check. And so I had made a shadow board on the right to help us identify if everything was there. Just one quick glance, yep, I know it's there, my check is done. And then we don't have our tools labeled here because we don't like to have stickers in a food plant. But you know, you can label things at home in cupboards, and but with the cutouts from the shadow board, we know exactly which tool is missing when we glance at it. The other part of set in order that you can do, or I should say one of the things we can do, is a spaghetti diagram. We want to see where there's wasted movement. So in this spaghetti diagram, this is one of our shredding lines here at work, and we had done this for our Greenbelt project. And what it had done is I was seeing somebody, all the movements that they had taken, and on the left there's the cutting room, auto cutter, and the shredder, and you can see that's where a majority of the movement was. Well, there was one tool that was way up on the right by the bagger, and then they would have to come all the way back and use it, and then take it all the way back up there, and then come all the way back to their work area. So we actually are in the process of moving that tool, but that is a really good example of how we can set the tools in order to be closer to where we want, to where our production is. The third step is shine. So what we need to do when we look in the shine step is what needs to be cleaned, set a schedule, so how often should it be clean, set up procedures, and set up inspection times. So typically you can make a chart, like maybe you have weekly tasks, you have daily tasks, monthly tasks. So the top picture here is actually me wiping off my desk. I have a shared office, so I shine every morning when I come into work, because with a bunch of other people touching everything at the same desk, I want it to be as germ-free as possible. And so every day I come in and I wipe it off, and I wipe off my grading tools before I use them to make sure that everything is clean. Other areas maybe of your home, obviously we need to clean the kitchen daily, and bathroom we also would want on a more frequent schedule. The The fourth step is standardize the right things the right way every time. So the reason why we would standardize is because once you develop your system and when you're going through your process, if it is all done different ways by every different shift or maybe 5 different people throughout the whole shift, then it's not being done very efficiently. So everybody does things a different way, and by standardizing it, we can ensure that it is done the right way every time. And things that we can do to help this out is to use visual process controls. So we just simply glance at a piece of paper nearby our workstation, and then we're able to see what exactly we should be doing. Also, we need to document the process steps, and this also helps us avoid reverting back to any other processes that we had before. So if we have a standard process, that's the one we always use. We don't end up going back to an old process where it was maybe choppy or not efficient. So here's some work instructions. On the far left, we have how to put on PPE, or personal protective equipment. And it's pretty easy. You just follow along with the pictures. You don't have to read a whole lot if you are in a hurry. The middle picture is about some shred heads that we have here at the plant, what they stand for. So when our cutters grab a head, they can see right away, is it the right cut? Is this the one they need? And then it doesn't even always have to be about production. It can just simply be punching in, like the picture on the right. So this is how to punch into the time clock. We have standard operations here at our facility for just about everything. And the last step of 5S is sustain. So you've done all this hard work with the first 4 S's. We want to take our time now to set up a nice audit form and then really maintain all that hard work that we did. So the first thing we would do is create a 5S audit form. And then you would set up a schedule frequency of audits. So typically you would audit once a shift. And the person being audited should be on the production floor doing the work. So a supervisor would audit an employee, but then in turn, the supervisor should be audited too to make sure they're doing their job correctly. So they would get audited by managers. And I did talk to one person who used to work for a different company. Their managers were audited by the VPs, and the VPs were audited by this person in continuous improvement. So they really went that extra step to make sure that their system was being maintained. And then also part of the sustaining section is continue to improve. So making sure that you're not becoming status quo or compliant, and always looking for new things to improve. So you tackle a project, you get it improved, and then you maintain it. You make sure it's still working. Maybe there's a little section of it that you're like, oh, we didn't see this before, so we're going to continue to work on that. And another part of sustaining is creating habits. It takes 21 days to form a habit, so this isn't really a sprint to 5S, it's more of a marathon. And then holding monthly meetings. And of course you could hold weekly meetings, but everybody's usually pretty busy. So monthly meetings seem to be the good amount for most companies. Pitfalls to avoid when 5S'ing, not looking for ways to improve. So again, becoming compliant, just thinking everything's status quo, so we're good, we don't have to fix anything else. Giving in to those resisting change. Not everybody likes change, and certainly a lot of people resist change. They think, oh, I've always done it this way, so there's no reason to change that or improve it. And then by giving into that and saying, oh, well, okay, well, you don't have to do it this way, but everybody else has to, it is a break in the system. And then not having upper management support. So 5S really comes from everybody. It goes from the top down and the down up. We want everybody to understand why we're 5S'ing and have upper management support that. So our next topic is standardized operating procedures, or SOPs. And I have a quick funny story about this. My husband works for a small machining company, and it's family owned, and he's worked there for I think 15 years now. And I have been writing and reading SOPs for more than 10 years. I can only remember back to 10 years, so definitely more than 10 years, and I've been working in corporate America for more than 10 years. And so recently, like within the last 6 months, he's come home from work and he's like, what? He's like, do you know what an SOP is? And I was looking at him, I was like, you need to explain that a little. And then he said, you know, something where everybody does something the same way. I'm like, oh, an SOP? So even though we might feel that, you know, this is, you know, something we see every day, not everybody sees standardized operating procedures. So this is what Wikipedia defines a standardized operating procedure as: a set of step-by-step instructions compiled by an organization to help workers carry out complex routine operations. SOPs aim to achieve efficiency, quality output, and uniformity of performance while reducing miscommunication and failure to comply with industry regulations. So SOP should be written so everyone and anyone can follow it. That means that if you have somebody walking off the street who's never been, so I work at a cheese plant, that's never been in a cheese plant, they can walk in, read the procedure, and they can know how to stack the boxes on the pallet, or they can know what side the label should go on the boxes. SOP should have a standardized format. They should also be controlled, a controlled document, numbered, and then also be in a register. That way you can easily find them. And they should also be reviewed on a determined frequency. Typically they're reviewed annually, or every 2 years, or every 3 years. You never know what changes. Sometimes you get new software through the company and you read through your procedure and you're like, oh, it references our old software, so you need to change that. Sometimes you may change the way a whole procedure is done if it is found to be more efficient to do it the new way. So we always need to be constantly updating those. So here's an example of an SOP that I put together on feeding my dogs, and we're just going to take it section by section at first. And the top is our subject, feeding the dogs. What manual is it in? It would be production. And then our section, so our number of our procedure, issued by myself and then approved by myself since I am the head of my household. Facility, we live in Cascade, and then the effective date, the date that it's written, and then when the last revision was. So if it would be a procedure that was already written but we're just reviewing it again, then our latest revision date would be the next year whenever it was reviewed. So the first part of an SOP, you need to have a scope, or what is the purpose of this procedure. And the purpose of the dog feeding procedure is to define when, how, and how much food to feed the dogs. Because if you know dogs, they're going to try to get you to feed them as much as possible and go to each person and say, hey, you know, that other person didn't feed us and look sad, and try to get fed more. The second step is responsibilities, and then the steps that actually how to do the procedure. So step 2.1, it is the responsibility of the adults and or the 10-year-old child to feed the dogs in the morning after awaking, and again in the afternoon at 5 p.m. plus or minus 30 minutes. So that defines who does it and then what the expectations are for frequency. And then steps 2.2 through 2.7 just go through exactly where to find the dog bowls, how to measure out their food, how much goes in each bowl, and then most importantly is to replace the lid on the tote so that they don't get into it. Steps 3 and 4, sections 3 and 4 are safety and supplies and materials. So if you were writing this for a production facility, the 3.1 step would be follow all your company safety procedures. At home, the most important thing is not to run with scissors. And then here we are putting it all together. So we want our procedure to be easily read. We want all the steps to be listed out for us. And SOP is, unless it's a very large procedure or complex procedure, they should be pretty short, 1 to 2 pages typically in length. So pitfalls to avoid when writing standardized operating procedures would be too detailed. So you don't want to get too detailed in your steps because they could be confusing. You also don't want to use very difficult language or big words. Not everybody knows the meaning of very big words, so we want to keep it simple. And then also not reviewing it. So you want to review these to make sure that you're always current on what's happening. And again, the frequency could be monthly, yearly, 2 years, 3 years, whatever works out. And then the last thing to avoid would be not being audited. So you take all this time to standardize your process, you 5Fs everything, you write all these SOPs, and then you don't audit anything. So you don't really know what's going on out on your production floor. Or in my case, I don't really know if my son is feeding the dogs the correct amount of food. So performing monthly audits typically, and or yearly, you can rotate through all your standardized operating procedures so they get hit once a year to make sure everybody is doing everything the correct way. Thank you.